I started my wood turning career in 1965. My father called up one day and said, "Hey, there's a wood lathe in the paper. Let's go take a look at it." My ex-wife said, "Don't buy it. We don't have any money." We had just been married 1 year. I said, "Don't worry." So we went there, and here's this cast iron lathe, dirty bench, couple tools on it. Looked like it was a Dunlap lathe, which looked like it had been made by Delta. Bushings in it, dirty. And anyway, I asked the woman, I said, "Why are you selling this?" And she says, "Why, my husband died, and I'm trying to clean the shop out." I says, "Well, what do you want for it?" She says, $10. Well, I ripped the pocket off trying to get my wallet out. When I went home, my ex-wife was very aggravated. Anyway, that next Christmas, I made candlesticks for my parents and her parents. The following year, I made a bowl for each parent and parent in-laws. The following year, I forget what I made, and she finally said, "You know, that really wasn't such a bad buy, was it?" Anyway, that was the start of my career. I was a tool and die maker. I worked for General Motors. I worked there for 31 years. What's really neat, like I said, I worked for 31 years, and now I've been retired for 32, and they're still paying me. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus.
That's why cars cost so much.
Anyway, I never saw anybody else turn on a wood lathe, so I applied all the knowledge that I had of a metal lathe onto the wood lathe, and I became very good at scraping. A metal lathe is actually set up right on dead center line, and that's the way I treated it. And what started me into cutting, I had a wood turning book by the name of Payne, and he was telling how to use a skew. And I read it, and I said, "That man's going to kill himself." So I reread it, and I still couldn't understand how he was doing that and not hurting himself. I did that about 3 times, and I finally got out of my chair, went down to my shop, put a piece of wood in and turned it, grabbed a skew, and did what he told me, and rolled off a big shaving. Eureka. I learned how to cut. That has been probably my best. Dale Nish taught me a lot on how to use gouges and cut with the gouge rather than scraping. Do I scrape? Absolutely. I don't think you can do anything without scraping a little bit. Sooner or later, you're going to get into a situation where it's going to affect you. But basically, I love the cut. Everything works easy. This piece of equipment that's in front of me here, I was doing Choco sticks for the Joliet police. This is not quite the set that I was doing. The ones for them had a little bigger end on it, and I would turn them and give them to them, and they would take and put shrink wrap over the end of them, which was black, and they carried those, and I think what stopped them from carrying them when they walked, they did that, they clicked, and people were upset with them, but I turned a lot of them. And then they banned them from the Joliet police. So at the time that I was making them, it was illegal to own, possess, or do anything with them. But I was making them for the police, so I got away with it. Okay, what I did, I was turning quite a few of them. Like I would go by a few 100 feet of 2-inch rough maple and cut it up into pieces and make these blocks. So I got tired of taking and using calipers and measuring, so I made a semaphore jig.
Is that what you want to do?
Can you get in on that?
Yep, you're on this thing?
I don't care whichever one you can show this on.
There you go.
Yeah, good.
Can you see it?
Right there.
Okay, that's good. Okay, what a semaphore jig is, these collars hold the fingers. And wherever they position, that would set the linear dimensions. The length of the fingers set the diameter.
So if you have this there,
No, this on the other side. Hang on, you're getting in the way. Anyway, this is what it would have been. So what I would do is I would put my piece in there, turn it round, flip all the fingers up, take my parting tool and go in and part it until the fingers fell through. When I was done going with all the fingers, I had my length set and I had all my diameters set. One of the things that I did to make it easy, I made myself a new tool. The one thing about this, it's nice and heavy. You didn't have to hold it on the tool rest, it did it itself. What I did is I took a piece of oil-hardened steel, blanked it out, and a buddy and I made a die and actually pressed it out in a hydraulic press. We made a few of them. Very nice tool. I rarely use it today, but back in the day when I was doing these, I could go up and down that thing and I would clean it off in no time at all. You want to hand that back? And don't hurt yourself with it if you're...
Dick, why is that special? Because of the size?
The diameter?
The diameter.
Yeah, it was just, I think that I probably could have done it with a regular tool today, but I'm never satisfied with doing things normal. I always tried to work things out. So I also made me a skew. It worked quite fine, but I could knock it out fast with that. Once in a while I would use this. Again, it was one of those things that I just did. Now, in between, when I did the handles, this is the tool that I used. Now it's a file, and you should never use a file for wood turning to a point. When I pass this around, you'll notice about where my finger is, there's a line. That's soft. The hardness is on the other end. Okay, people use the regular file and they get a little aggressive with it and they have a tendency to snap. Okay, I cut it off. I don't have much to worry about it snapping.
Hey, Dick, could you put it under that camera? Do you want to switch to the other camera? There you go. Thank you.
Why don't you hand that out to somebody out there?
Sure.
I think you said those were Rockwell 60, the hardness.
Pardon?
I think you said those were Rockwell 60 hardness.
Yeah, something like that. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. I'll put it this way. They're hard and they cut.
That's very hard material, but it's also very brittle. That's why it breaks so easily.
Yeah, but as thick as that is, if I broke that, I'd have to have run over it with my pickup.
Dick, would you recommend that people make tools out of files today?
No, If you are, shorten them up. I mean, shorten them up. Files are fine, as long as you get it down to where it's not gonna be a brittle tool. The tang end, when that goes around, if you really look, you can see where the tang end is soft compared to the rest of the file. When I went traveling, I always had a bunch of tools and I just had them in a tool bag, and I never wanted to take and beat my tools up. So I made a sheet for them. What I did is I took and made a wood copy, and I wrapped it in a piece of wax paper. Then I took brown paper, laid it down, took regular tight bond glue and watered it down and painted the paper and just rolled it up and let it dry for a day. Then went in and trimmed it. Pull that other one out and you got a sheet for your tool. Everybody has tools to get into, angles around the corners, all that kind of stuff. And this is a tool that I can't remember the guy's name. Bill, you remember the guy that used to make this out of Indiana?
Don Bunce.
Yep. He used to make this. Now the neat thing about this, you can take that cutter out of there and put it at the end and use it straight.
Do you want to put it on the dustpan?
I got it.
I seem to have to do a lot of drilling on round things, always have. I made a V-block, and I think everybody has to make a V-block if you're gonna turn something round. I also took a piece of steel and I cut it at 45, so that is just a perfect fit into here. So you can take into your quill on your drill press, find the center of that, and when you lay a round object in there, you're hitting it dead center. Yeah, I wasn't satisfied with just always using clamps. A lot of times I wanted it positioned in different ways. So I had magnets that I put on here. Little costly, but the wife didn't even know it was gone. Believe it or not, that is one of the most handy tools that I have. It's just a jar. I've taken a metal lid and inlaid it into the top, drilled a hole up through it, and put a sawed-off brush into it. I never have to clean a brush. I have two of these on my bench all the time. One has depth full strength in it. The other has depth that is thin. Now, if you make this, I glued it together with epoxy. The first one I ever made, number one, I made it in a pint jar, which was ridiculous because if you did anything like vermilion or anything, you stain the finish. The second thing, one day I picked it up and it all fell apart because of the depth of lacquer type finish in there dissolved the epoxy, so it fell apart. Well, I wasn't going to be beat, so I took and re-epoxied it. But then around on the inside, the only joint that it could get at, I put silicone adhesive. Problem solved. This was one of the projects when I was doing John C. Campbell down in Brasstown, North Carolina. I don't know how many of these things the people made. 20 years of making those and we had a good time with them.
Talk about that.
I did have that at a wood turning symposium in Utah. And somehow it got knocked off the lathe and broke the handle off. So I had to repair that. You want to set that down? Sure. I love making tools. I'm never satisfied with what's out there. Yes, I have about every tool that's made and a few that I made. So I have an array of tools that's been collected over years and years. But every once in a while, I like to make just a small tool that, you know, I hold in one hand, I can do whatever I want and hold that tool.
Just switch to the other camera.
Vic, if you slide that box, there you go.
That's a little gouge. This one happens to be for making very delicate captive rings. It's made out of a Allen wrench. This is another one of the modern style for making captive rings. This makes about an 1/8 inch captive ring.
How did you make that, or did you just change the handle?
I made it.
Uh-huh.
And a parting tool, just a 1/16 parting tool. But every once in a while, you have to have something that's really thin. That's made out of a hacksaw blade. Now, the bottom is where the teeth were, because that's where it's hard. I just stoned them off, made it small. Now you're going to ask me, how do I take and get a piece that flat to go into a round hole? What I did, I took a 3/8 dowel, cut it down on a bandsaw, and glued that in. Then all I had to do was glue that into a tool handle. Very simple, very effective. Every once in a while, you have to do something that's real delicate, trying to move something. You know, every once in a while, you want to move something and you don't want to really hit it too hard. This is full of number 11 shot, and it makes a non-blow mallet in a sense.
A dead, what is it, dead blow?
Pardon?
Is it a dead blow?
Dead blow.
Is it a dead blow? Dead
Yes,
blow?
yes,
Okay.
that's the proper word. I was stymied, sorry. Now, that right there is a very, very important tool. It's a piece of banding stock. And when you're turning a bowl and you're doing the outside, and you say, well, is that smooth? Take and bend that right on the bowl. And if there's any gaps in there, or if there's a high spot that's going to cause gaps, you can visually see what's there. Please bring it back.
Tonight?
I love inlays. These are done using a chuck that is offset. You have a hole or a screw on the back that allows you to rotate this in 12 different positions. It also, you can put it out of alignment 4 spaces. I mean, you can't think of enough things to do with this. And it is positive. What I do is I put a piece of double-face tape on there and my inlay, and I go ahead and turn it. I've been doing that for years. Well, I'll pass these around with it. I think they're very neat.
Dick, is that, Vic-Mark, Axminster?
It's an Axminster.
Axminster?
Yeah. That's the only one. They make another one. A fellow, I think, in Ohio makes a small one. And I went to buy one, and Niles was out of them at the time. So, I mean, I really don't know why. I was just going to try and play with it to see what it was like. Now, this is really neat. But to cut those, my tool is nothing more than a 1/4-inch square scraper. But on this side, you can't see it very good there, but this is relieved, except for right on the very edge, which is a part of the original tool. Now, this is relieved here, because when you go in on a circle, if I didn't, I would foul out on the edge of the tool. So with it being relieved, coming around the tool is relieved. And this little piece that I've left on here, the nice thing about that, once you start it, you just hold that in and you can just follow through and it makes a straight line. Yes.
After visiting your shop once or twice, I've seen the notebooks that you keep with all these different designs. Do you have any of these published?
No.
Where you...
I've had people that wanted me for years to do a book, and I thought about it, and like everything else, it kind of went by the wayside. I guess I just never really had the desire to do another book. But I had thought about it numerous times. I've been asked numerous times.
Would you be willing to share some of those notes that you've got then?
Yeah, I can give some.
I mean, photocopy or something like that?
I'll see what I can do.
That would be great if the clubs could put them on their websites.
Dick,
Yes.
just a general question about tools. When you got started in wood turning, were there many tools out there? Were they accessible? Were they too expensive? And in your assessment, has that world changed enough so that you would do things differently today?
There were no bowl gouges. The only gouges you found were the European style, which were very shallow, mainly used for spindle work. They weren't used for bowls. I saw a fellow, I can't think of his name. He built houses after. He's a Swedish fellow or something, and I watched one of his videos, which was very different at the time, and he used a piece of water pipe, cut back, and I looked at that and I says, huh. The next day I took a piece of round stock and milled a hole down the center and made my own bowl gouge. The first bowl gouges I ever saw were made by who's the main one?
Sorby?
Sorby. They were square pieces forged to make a bowl gouge. And the outside was actually basically oval or almost square. They were not what we would call bow gouges today. They were crude, I guess would be a proper word for them. I had a set of those, and I wish I had kept them. A guy wanted them pretty bad. He was going home to Kentucky, and he wanted tools, so I sold them to him, and I kind of wish that I had kept those, strictly because I'd never seen another set like them. Yeah. Okay, when I'm making my inlays, I always had I would just put a piece of scrap up on a chuck and double face tape and turn my diameter of whatever my inlay was going to be. Well, that got kind of hard to do at times. You know, I was impatient a lot, so I would take it, you know, I wasn't gentle all the time. So how do you take and hold that and not mark it? That was my big thing. So one day I took and I made a piece. And I put a bearing on the end of it. And it worked pretty good. Then I got looking in craft supplies where I got my live center had inlet or inserts that went into it that had a 1/4 inch end on it. So I said, "Whoa!" So I ground the ends off and pressed router bearings on them. Believe me, they work beautiful.
How do you use those, Dick?
Pardon?
How do you use those?
How do I use them?
Yeah.
I just take and put them in and bring them up and let it spin, you know, just hold the inlay on
I
there.
see what you're saying.
But being flat on, you know, on the diameter, and yes, this turns, but so does this.
Got it.
So it doesn't mark my inlay up. I used to use, you know, whatever I could, you know, I'd make something like that and cut it out of aluminum on my lathe, but they never really worked like I thought they should.
Dick, were you using that as a clamping device to hold the inlay in
Hold the inlay in.
while you were turning it also, or you
Yes.
were done with it?
I turned it.
Okay,
Now, this is when I was roughing them.
gotcha.
When I went to turn, if I had to turn it, you know, on the axis, then I had to get this out of the way. But when you're turning them and they're not concentric, by using this, you could hold them and get them round with no time at all.
Thank you, sir.
If I lost this, I might as well close my shop down. I've lived with a scale in my pocket since 1960. But to me, this is the best one I've ever had my hands on. I get it at Lee Valley. It's got two different markings on one side, one on the other, and you'll see when it goes around. And it's copper or chrome clad, so you can see it. It's just a really, really good scale.
You gonna trust us with it?
Beg pardon?
You gonna trust us with it?
I said, are you gonna trust us with it?
Oh, yeah. We set one of the things up out here. Anybody that goes through that has metal in their pocket is going to be stopped.
And you're gonna try those nunchucks on them.
I didn't realize Lee Valley was in business that long.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been buying off of there for many years. In fact, years ago, when Axminster started with their chucks, I made the big machine chuck. Lee Valley sold parts, or sold those in the parts, so that goes back many, many years. And one of the other things that I use in relation, or with that scale, I go to Home Depot or those places that have the little Formica samples. You know, and I go in there and I say, well, my wife liked like that one, maybe that one. I used to be welcome at Home Depot. In fact, I don't know if they even have those little ones anymore, but I squared them up on my sander. And when you can't get anything large in to check a flat or something, that's what you need. Even if you cut a little piece of wood, anything small like that, you know, if you're doing a base on a bowl or something and you want to go in there and check to see what it looks like, good things. Measuring tools, love them. This is one that comes from Premier Gauge Company. I don't know, I had a bunch of them in here a couple of years ago. I brought them in for the guy. They're very, very neat, and they get in places that other ones can't. But if I could only have one for my ornaments, I'll take that one. What it is a piece of coat hanger. And you can take and draw the outline of whatever you want to measure and take a piece of wire and fit it to fit in there. This one, what I've done, I have between the two tips 5/16 of an inch. Now I put that inside of one of the ornaments and I go around. And if I have a 16th showing, or excuse me, if I have a 1/4 of an inch showing, I have a 16th wall. There's two kinds of coat hangers. Some are the real thin ones. This one has a little bit of spring. It has some tensile strength to it. So you can bend it a little bit and it'll still pop back. Some of the other ones, you bend it a little bit and you have to reset it. I don't know how many years I've carried that one, and it has been great. For my life center and that, you always need a little Allen wrench to take and loosen up for whatever you're putting in there. I never like to use an Allen wrench, so I make my own handles. This particular one, I was in the Boeing, I guess you would call it their gift shop. Anything that they had in excess, you could go in and buy. And they use Allen wrenches for a lot of their screws all over the plane. And the Allen wrenches come straight, about that long, and their handles are made where that will go down into the handle. Well, I had to buy a few of those and make my own. I don't use the long one, but all I have to do is loosen that screw and I could take and pull that out a ways.
Dick, I must have missed it. What on earth does this thing do?
It locks down on your drill press table
Those are magnets.
Oh, with the magnets?
with the magnets.
Gotcha. No, I understand now.
But the nice thing about the magnets, if you don't have it just perfectly straight or whatever you want, you can set it, you know, and lock it down immediately. This happens to be a little drill. It's meant to hold real small drills in a larger chuck, like a Jacobs 18 will only go down to an 1/8 inch diameter drill. So this actually is a straight shaft that would go into the drill. You could put your small drills in it.
Is it a pin vise?
Now, pardon?
Is it a pin vise?
Yeah, pin vise.
That's exactly what it is. Okay, I use it with a little handle. If I'm gonna put, say, an eyelet or something in, instead of using my drill press, I just go up there and let it find its center and give it a shove, and I got my hole. Loosen it up, and the drill goes back down inside, and I've always got it with me.
Anybody else notice how beautiful the handles are on all these things? Oh my God.
When I go to the grinder and I use a Wolverine jig or a type, one I've made myself, but I mean, it's still a Wolverine type jig. You have to set the length of the tool outside the jig. I just use nylon and I drill the hole to depth that I need to set it, and all I have to do is put that over the end of the tool, slide it down to the jig, and lock it. I like to have my machines set up square. This is a Wixie jig. I don't know if anybody's ever used one.
All those are great.
They are fantastic.
I use that all the time.
I mean, you take and set it on something and lock it. Set it on the opposite side. Well, whichever side moves, you set it on the solid side first, then you can move the other one until it reads out to 0. And believe me, it's well worth the money. They're about $30, I believe. I don't have a battery in that one at the time.
Dick, what are your thoughts on sharpening jigs?
What do you mean?
I suspect when you started, there weren't many out there.
There were none.
Today, for somebody starting to turn today, what would you recommend with regard to sharpening jigs?
I would tell them, spend the money and buy yourself a Wolverine or something capable and learn how to use the tool. Again, like Paul said, when I started, everything was hand sharpened. I didn't have too much of a problem because that really was my trade. I mean, I learned that from day one. I used to sharpen my own drills. I still do. And sharpening a drill is basically kind of like sharpening a gouge. I mean, you got the same type movements. So I learned how to sharpen tools. I was never happy with them if they had all kind of facets on them. I wanted my tools to look good and to work good. And to do that, you had to have a good cut on a tool. If you've got facets on a cutting edge, man, that's nothing but pure misery. When I was doing all my ornaments, there were very, very few tools that you could go in and hollow with. This one, I don't know how many ornaments it has hollowed out. What it is a long handle Allen wrench. On one side, I put a flat. On the other side, I put a flat, which would be the top. Now, that one is important because when you grind your edge, that is going to create your sharp edge. So you need that top piece, you need the radius that you're doing, and I always like to have a little bit of flat on there. But it used to cut a lot. I mean, I did very little sharpening on it. It just always worked for me. Do I have other ones? Yeah, I've even got the round ones now, the carbide ones. I still go back to my old one. Yes,
What kind of graining wheels, rest of those wheels do you use?
do I have now, you mean?
No, your graining wheels, they're not the standard hard ones, they're probably the softer ones.
I use CBNs,
Use CBN.
yeah.
Okay.
Before there was the white ones, I used those. The only time I ever used the ones that came on the grinder was to sharpen the lawnmower. They were not meant for tools. I use CBN wheels now, and I think they are something else. They are really a great, great wheel. The powdered metal tools, Thompson, some of those people, I had them before, and I really was kind of unhappy with them because I could never get them as sharp as I could my high-speed steels. And then I went to CBN wheels, and you can cut yourself on those tools now with those wheels. They have made such a difference to me on the powdered metal tools that I couldn't go back to the other ones. They really work great on there.
What's your final grit on those?
I've got them from 180 to 320.
You use the CBN to sharpen your Allen wrenches too?
No. I've got a belt sander, a belt grinder, I should say. It's a belt or variable speed belt grinder. And I use that for most of my shaping and that. CBN wheels, if you go and use mild steel on them, it picks up on the wheel and clogs it up. But if you have one of those erasers for the sanding this, it does a nice job cleaning that off.
What about a diamond wheel?
I've never had one. I've used them. Simple little thing. Marking your wood. I don't know what you use. Probably like everybody, a Sharpie, and you can't see after it dries. A Bic eraser pen works great. Anytime I got wood to be marked, I just use that, and you can see it halfway across the shop what it is. Okay, this is pre-ring gauge days. When I made my captive ring tools, I made a left and a right. In other words, I could go in halfway and halfway. I wasn't smart enough to make them like the new ones where you could turn it over. But these used to really be nice on account of they cut clean. What I used to do to make those, I'd go to the flea market and buy dental picks. And if I wanted a 1/4-inch radius, I went to the vise and I put a 1/4-inch rod in my vise. Heated the end of that, grabbed it with a pair of pliers and bent it around that 1/4-inch, and that gave me my radius. Then I would go in and trim it. And I would do it left and right. There's 1/4 and an 1/8. Simple little things that probably people don't even think about. When I do my inlays, I've got them on there with double-faced tape. Sometimes it becomes very difficult to get it off. So what I did, I went and got a thin putty knife and I cut it off. That way, nothing flexes on it, and yet it's very thin, and you can go up there and start that and go between the two pieces and get the tape out of there. Naturally, I sharpened it. Threading tools. Everybody always grabs their tools and looks at them and just tries to use them. When this goes around, you'll notice on the lead edge, I have grounded. The reason I grounded, it only had half a tooth. If you look at the opposite side, it only has half a tooth. So if you didn't do that, when you want to start that tool, you're starting it with a half a tooth and it just doesn't work. But nobody ever tells you to go in there and straighten that out.
Dick, is that just on the tool you bought, or are they all made with a half a tooth?
No, that's just a tool that I bought. I've looked at a lot of them. I've seen guys have them and say, like guys would bring them to the Campbell. How do I thread? You know, and take a look at it and say, well, number one, you're not going to thread with that one because it has half a tooth and you can't start it. So I've got the male, female, and this one is to go on the inside to make a little relief so that when you go in with your tool, you've got a place to stop and get it out before you jam everything up.
Dick, any thoughts on hand chasing threads versus threading jigs?
You know, Paul, I have one from Bonnie Klein, and I've never used it. I think that for a lot of people, that is really the way to go. The hand thread, you have to have, I guess you have to be fluid. I mean, when you're making that move, you just can't walk up and start it. It just doesn't work that way. You have to go in and make a couple passes, and every pass will make a little bit more. And finally get the tool where it's going all the way down. But I have watched like Bill Jones, Ellen Batty, those guys were unreal with them. I mean, they were just, I have a chess set from Bill Jones.
Oh, wow.
King and queen are that tall. 5 pieces, all hand threaded together. They're actually unreal. Even the pawns are hand threaded. Now, not all of it, because the female, they couldn't go in there, so they did use a tap. But if they could get a tool in there, they hand threaded them. I have a baby rattle from Bill Jones that he was threading the handle, and he turned the lathe off and took the handle and just went shh, and it went in and just perfect. And his comment was, oh, I should have left a little bit to sweeten. It was perfect. But that's just the way he was. I've seen him take and cut a little piece of ebony or ivory and stick it in his pocket. I said, Bill, what do you do that for? He says, oh, I'll thread that onto something. Little pieces. I mean, the guy was amazing. I'm sure somebody's going to have some pens.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
When you glue the tubes in, I don't care who you are, sooner or later, you're going to get some glue or something inside that tube. I have a reamer It just goes inside the tube. On its own, it was too big, so I just took and chucked it up in the lathe, took a flat diamond, ran the lathe in reverse so I didn't affect the cutting edge, and cut it down enough that it just went in without affecting the tool, or the tube rather. I did that for 2 different ones. They work great. Where did I get the reamers? Out of my toolbox after I retired. I had some reamers in there. And what do you normally use them for? I don't make dies anymore, so I cut them down and made tools that work for me.
Aren't those called chucking reamers?
Pardon?
Aren't those called chucking reamers?
They were straight ones, yeah, and I had the shank on them for chucking.
Like I get them from MSC, but this Chinese place up in,
Yeah, you can buy them in all different sizes, tremendous amounts. And when I was trimming the tools, I always liked to use that, and rather than using a drill or something, I always had a hand hold on it. And I always sharpen those, believe it or not, with a round diamond. I would go in and sharpen those.
Sorry, sir.
You'll notice there's some eggs over there on the table. I've made a few of them. Wife and I will be married 35 years in April. The 15th. I never forget my anniversary.
Do you want one first?
Go ahead. Let's see. A couple weeks before Easter, on our first anniversary, Cindy said, I would like a wooden egg. So, you know how that is, in one ear and out the other. That morning came out, I gave her some candy and a card and whatever, and no egg. She never said a word, but you could see she was disappointed. So she was walking through the living room, going to get a dress, and looked down along the sofa, and there laid an egg. And she sounded like a little kid. Thank you. And I said, well, you better find the rest of them. And I had hid 13 of them around the living room, different woods. I had no idea the monster that I created. From that day on, every Easter, I made eggs for my wife, my daughters, my mother, my mother-in-law. It was nothing. Every year I'd make 35, 40 eggs. And I always did everything I could to get a wood that I did not have. Went to Australia. Hey, they got all kinds of new woods, so I got some different woods. I went back a couple years later, and they knew I was looking for wood, and these guys come up with armloads. So I went to my buddy's lathe, and I blanked them out. I didn't know how wet it was or anything else, but I blanked them and sealed them, put them in a box, went to UPS, and the guy said, what do you got? And I said, wood. He said, I can't ship wood. I says, really? I says, why? What do you do for other stuff? He says, well, that's craft wood. I says, it's craft wood. Okay. So the box weighed 75 pounds, which was just everything I could ship. Cost me $150, which was European, which only cost me 75. Our buck at that time was twice theirs. I got home and they were on the steps. I made 101 eggs that year. Right now we have probably 350, 400 eggs, and the majority of them are stuff I've never heard of. Kelly Dunn, he's a turner in Hawaii. Every so often he sends me a box of stuff. I can't pronounce the names. But a lot of them are shrubs. Anything I could get an egg out of, but we have eggs on top of eggs.
So with 400 of them, how long does it take Cindy to find them all now? I mean, it's great.
Well, what you see over there with my neck the way it is, I spent a couple weeks turning those. I could turn one or one and a half and have to quit. I just couldn't take it no more. But I have this certain friend that brought me a whole box full of what you see over there, which I don't know if you've ever turned resin. You throw this stuff all over the place and it has static electricity. And I'm trying to figure out how to get that guy over to clean my shop.
Did you ask him?
Thank you, John.
Did you ask him?
Well, unless you got something that I can, or questions, I'm done.
How does that Easter egg chuck work?
Oh, sorry. When I first started turning eggs, when I would have them between centers and when you would go in to part that off with a skew, I would burnish the ends of those eggs. And yet they're very, very difficult to sand because it's end grain. So originally I made a wooden one of these. It's called a finger chuck. In fact, on the book with the eggs in it, it does have a wooden finger chuck. Whenever I turned or did a book, I would go home and naturally, my mind is going back what I could have done, what I should have done. And a wooden finger chuck is difficult because it's not uniform all the way around. Some of the grain is one way and some's a little other, so they don't all function uniformly. So I says, well, why don't I make it out of PVC? I've been making them out of PVC ever since, and they work great. But I turn it between centers, I push it in, and I've got the center from either the live center or from the center on the lathe or from my tailstock. Pick that hole up, tighten it down, and turn my piece on the end and sand it. Now everybody says, well, don't you hit those clamps? They're swinging around like meat cleavers. And I tell them you can always put a rubber band around it, you could put tape around them, or you can do what I do. Keep your fingers out of them. And no, I've never really got nailed by one. Anybody want to see that?
Sure. Senator.
Nice catch, poor throw.
Man, if that guy played baseball or something, that would have been nice. Way to field the bunch. Nice.
Okay, is there anything, anybody's got a question or want me to repeat anything, or?
Oh, I had a question, Dick. Can you hear me, Dick?
Yeah.
Have you sold a lot of stuff over the years? Did you do a lot of shows?
When I first retired, I was 51 years old and I was bored to death. I didn't want to get another job. At 51 years old, what do you do? I didn't know computers. So anyway, I said, well, I'll work a few art shows, and I started doing art shows. And there were days where I spent the full week or 2 weeks turning from daylight to dark because I sold small stuff. I have sold a lot of bowls. I've sold everything, but I mean, when it comes down to it, when I was doing the art shows, if I sold a bowl, that was frosting on the cake. It was all the little things that I used to sell. Door stops. I sold enough damn door stops that, carpenters were mad at me because you shouldn't jam a wedge underneath the door, but I sold a lot of them. Ceiling fan pulls. $6 for a little ceiling fan pull. Oh, I like that. Is there a light switch on that fan? Oh, yeah. How about the closet? You got one swing in it? Here they walk away with a handful of ceiling fan pulls that were nothing but scrap to me. I used to turn for hours and never shut the lathe off. Little Carbotech and just keep turning. When I got them all done, I'd throw them in a bucket of oil and pick them out and let them dry. Yes, I have stuff in galleries. I don't anymore. My last gallery just closed up. I don't care anymore. I guess that's the main thing. I turned 84 last week, and if I haven't made it, I'll never make it.
So for somebody starting today who has dreams of selling a lot of their stuff and making a lot of their stuff, any advice to those folks?
I have had people ask me that numerous times. I want to become a full-time turner. What do you suggest? Keep your day job. A doctor told me that years ago. I was out at a wood turning symposium in Utah, and I was standing talking to him, and I said, man, I've seriously considered quitting my job and going to turn. He asked me what I did. I told him I worked for General Motors. I worked on quality control at the time. And he said, can I give you a piece of advice? And I said, go right ahead. He says, keep your day job. He says, you'll have time to do that later on in your life. And he was right. I only know a couple turners that have made their entire livelihood off of turning. Raffin is one. But the majority of the guys that can call themselves full-time turners had something that most people never thought about. They had a spouse that had a job that had insurances. And to me, when I retired, I always thought about the money aspect of it. I'll take the benefits for insurance any day of the week over the money. If you haven't saved a little bit, you're in deep trouble.
How do you hold this in your chop, this part?
Go inside and expand it.
Oh, okay, so with the little jaws, yeah.
That's an X-Men or a Vic Mark 100 with the regular jaws on it.
If you like to see Dick making Easter eggs, it's on the Windy City YouTube. The whole thing is there. He did it for Chicago Woodturners.
Yeah. How's my time?
I think we're right on the edge. Anybody else have any other questions?
Hour and 5 minutes.
Dick, for anybody who doesn't know a lot about your history, your books still available, and how many books were there altogether?
I had 9 books out there. There's, I think, one of them, I think it is the Birdhouse book, is not in print anymore. I think the other ones still are. But the one book that really sold more than any other was the one I fought tooth and nail with the publisher on, and that was Pens. I told him I did a book, and I think this one, or Pens, was the second or the third book. And he didn't think that I should do a pen book. And pens were just starting where people didn't say, you turn pens? I thought you were wood turners. You know, and yes, I went through a lot of that shit. But anyway, it was just getting to where people were starting to become interested in turning pens. So I talked him into it, and he says, okay. So I went and I did all everything, and we had it down to it came back from wherever they printed it up, and you were supposed to give the final okay on it. Well, it had one of these jars sitting on its side with the big thing, so it was a 90-degree rotation. He didn't want to change that, and I said, well, I'm not going to do that, you know, and it had 3, 4, 5 different things that I thought should have been changed. Well, Peter was, I'll tell you what kind of a man he was. When he had one leg, And he had a wooden leg on the other one, and I saw him get mad enough to where he took that leg off and threw it across the room. So that's the attitude Peter had. But anyway, we're eating dinner and we're arguing what we're gonna do with the book. And he's not gonna do anything with it. And I says, well, Peter, I'm eating my lunch. I says, talk to you later, and I hung the phone up. Well, a couple of months later, he called up and he said, let's straighten this out. I says, fine. So we reached agreements and got everything straightened out. Down the line, called me up, I want you to do a humidor. He says, you're beating the wrong drum, Peter. I says, a round humidor is ridiculous. I want a round humidor in the book, blah, blah. So we argued back and forth, and finally I caved in, and I made him a round humidor book. So shortly after that, I went back in, and I says, I forget what I was gonna do, maybe the birdhouses or something. And he looked at me and he says, well, you proved you know what you're doing, and I proved I don't know what you're doing. And he says, so whatever you want to do, I will back you. So that every time I wanted a book, I just went in and we did it. But I have 9 of them out there, and did I make money off of them? No, you don't make money off of those. To make money off of a book, you got to sell a few million of them, and there's not a few million woodturners in the whole country. But what did it do? It put my name out there. I mean, people from all over the world knew Dick Singh. There was a few I wish they didn't know my name. But that's, to me, that was the best thing that happened turning books, was that it got me. Well, I've been to Australia twice. I've been to England, Ireland, Canada. I've been to Alaska a couple of times, and I think just about every state in the Union I've been at demonstrating. How can you retire on something better than that? And that all happened after I retired, like Doc told me. He says, keep your job, you'll have time later. And it worked out that way for me.